My name is Emil Pakarklis. I'm the founder of iPhone Photography School, and in this video you're going to discover how to take beautiful and unique photos of mountains and forests. But before we begin this video, I want to take a moment to quickly say thanks to everyone who watched the first free video in this video series. There were so many amazing and supportive comments, so thank you very much for that. So for this video, we've partnered up with Jill Emmer, who's one of the most talented iPhone photographers I know about. Jill has a very beautiful and a very unique, minimalistic style of iPhone photography. And by sharing her exceptional iPhone photos on Instagram, Jill has acquired more than 94,000 followers on Instagram. So in this video, you're going to discover everything there is to know about taking beautiful and unique iPhone photos of mountains and forests. And the problem that you often have when taking photos of mountains is that there are only so many interesting and unique mountain ranges, and often thousands of people keep taking the exact same photos of the exact same mountains. And obviously that's not very creative or interesting. So in this video, Jill is going to share specific techniques for how you can make your photos of mountains and forests both beautiful and also unique, so that they're different from the photos that everyone else is taking. So now, let's switch over to Jill.
This first video is about taking photos of mountains and forests, and it's called How to Take Beautiful Photos of Mountains and Forests. And there's a few things we're going to cover in it. One is finding your unique take, how to make it maybe a little bit different and stand out from the rest, especially when it comes to mountain photography. We're also going to talk about lighting. We're going to talk about different types of weather and the time of day, and different types of perspective and how that can really change your photos. So the first thing I want to talk about is finding your unique take. And what I mean by that is, let's say you live in the United States. There's X amount of mountain ranges and X amount of national parks, and the spots that are easiest to get to, for instance, this photo here is at the Grand Teton National Park. The spots that are easy to take photos at, they've had thousands of photos taken of them before, right? And people walk up, they take a picture, and the person next to him takes a picture, and everybody has the same photo. So essentially, you're dealing with the same backdrop. It is jaw-breakingly beautiful, and it could easily be a framed photo of just the backdrop. But I think what's really important when you think of these things is, how can I make it unique? And maybe that's the lighting, that's maybe just an angle, maybe it's a person or a prop. You can see here, I tried to make this a little unique by having my husband wrap a blanket around him that we had just gotten in Jackson Hole. Another thing that makes your photos unique is the weather. And in this picture, this is an edit, but you can see that I took advantage of these clouds. And if you look closely at the clouds, they almost sort of form mountains themselves. And the mountains below mimic the mountains above. And so playing with the weather and the lighting is something that can definitely make your photo unique. If you can go to the mountains when it's a big storm, or the clouds are very dramatic, or there's beautiful fog, that'll really change the way your photo appears versus the person next to you. Because in those kind of days, usually there aren't as many people, and it's what really dramatizes and makes the photo stand out. So the weather can definitely play an important role in making your photo unique. Another thing is adding a foreground subject. And as you see here, the picture of Mount Rushmore with my son, this picture must have been taken 10,000 times, right? This itself is not a unique photo, but I wanted to include it because I think it's a nice way to show you the rule of thirds. And with mountain ranges, you kind of can let them act as a backdrop and put a subject up front. And when you do that, it's usually nice to have your subject over on the left-hand quadrant with the rule of thirds or the right-hand quadrant, but usually not in the center. And so this photo is nicely balanced between the subject in the front and the subject in the back. So when you add a subject with a mountain range, usually you're going to have something in the foreground and the mountains in the back. This photo with the umbrella is another example of a subject in the front and the mountains in the back. And in this case, the mountains in the back are just kind of playing a secondary role. They're adding some color, some interest, but what makes this photo interesting really is the subject in the front and the flowers in the front. And also the color, having that bright color up front really makes a difference. Now, can you imagine if I didn't have a picture, if my son wasn't playing in this field of flowers and he was over a little bit to the left-hand side where it was just green grass, and I have a picture of him standing and everything in the background, these hills, these mountains are also green, you can see that it would just be all green. There wouldn't be any kind of contrast. There wouldn't be color. So by having him, I caught him when he was playing in these flowers, but having him stand in these flowers and hand him an umbrella, it really adds something very interesting in the foreground versus just kind of using the backdrop as your point of interest. Okay, lighting. Lighting plays a large part in photography, in all aspects of photography. And with mountain photography, lighting is very interesting because there's many different ways that you can play with lighting when it comes to mountains. And it's either you concentrate on how the light is hitting the mountains, which is usually in the background, or how the light is hitting the subject that's in the foreground. And that's what I did with this photo. The reason I really liked this photo was, and decided to keep it and use it, was just that tiny little sliver of light that's running all along the right-hand side of his face and his arm, his shoulder. Just that little bit of whiteness, I just love it. I love how that pops and is greatly contrasted to everything that's in the background. The mountains in this case are dark and they're probably backlit, mostly backlit. And so this is a photo where the subject really stands out and then he's balanced out with the lighter colored sky. So that is playing with lighting on the subject in the foreground. And with this next part is called the time of day. That is kind of where you play with lighting, of course, on the subject in the foreground, but also in the background. This photo of me taking a photo really shows you how the light on the mountains really makes a difference. And this is a spot near Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It's a well-known photograph spot. And obviously, I'm not going to catch the most unique photo standing there with my iPhone like that. But when you add the subject with an iPhone in the mountains, I think it really gives it something unique and something maybe a little different than what other people are taking, especially with kind of a bright red hat. And that's when the light really plays an effect. And this photo is of a sunrise. We got up very early. I think we got up at like 4:30, and we drove up to the national park and reached this spot before this pink light hit these mountains. And so then we just kind of waited, and we didn't have to wait long, and there were a lot of other people there taking the same picture, maybe like 10 other people also awake taking the same picture. And when that light from behind me, the subject in this photo, when that light started to rise up and shine on the mountains, it transformed everything. The mountains took on this very beautiful pink hue. And didn't last long. The window of the mountains looking like that might have been for maybe 15 minutes or so. And then the light got stronger and that pink was gone. So lighting and the time of day can make a huge difference to what your picture turns out. If you just walked up to the scene in the middle of the day, it would be pretty, but it wouldn't have that beautiful pink hue to it. So to really take that into effect, and sometimes I think it really is worth getting up a little bit early or staying up late to catch these special moments that are fleeting. Okay, with mountains, you can also take photos as we were looking with the light shining on the mountain, or you can take pictures of the light coming from behind the mountain. And when the light is behind the mountains, that's called backlit. So this is a scene that I love when you go to the mountains and it has those sort of layers like that, of the depth of layers of darkness. And so I really decided to zoom in on that and play with that with this photo. So this is an edit. I used the Reflect app to add that reflection. The dark part of this photo also, I did do a little bit of editing. I darkened it, and I think I did some retouch, but it's more or less how it looked. And so what I really love is when you can take a backlit photo of the mountains and you can get some contrast in there. The mountains lend for some really nice contrast. So if you are going to take a picture of the mountains that's backlit, just remember that you're just going to get the silhouette of the mountains. So if you have a person standing, like we were just talking about the rule of thirds, you have a person up front and the mountain is backlit, that person's barely going to be visible. It's much better to take it than with the light coming from over you, the photographer's shoulder, and having it well lit instead of backlit. If there's something on the top of the mountain or in the air, then that would make for a beautiful silhouette too. Then that's a nice place to have a subject. But I think the mountains, taking photos of the mountain backlit, you can really play with these layers. Okay, and now we're on to talking about taking photos in woods. And as you can see, I love the woods. I'm sorry, I know it's a terrible pun. We're going to talk about how taking pictures in the woods is all about the lighting and some ways that you can use the lighting and play with the lighting and work around it when it's too dark, and also how the woods can make for a really nice backdrop. So first thing I want to do is just show you how lighting plays such a huge role when it comes to taking pictures in the forests. And these were taken up at a national forest in Wisconsin. So these two pictures are not of the exact same woods, but they're of woods that are very similar and very close to one another. And as you can see, the first photo was taken on a partly cloudy sort of day with a little bit of blue sky, mostly clouds, no harsh light. You don't even really see any shadows, very uniform light. Second photo is taken at sunset time. And you can just see the difference between the two. You can see how the lighting makes all the difference in the world, and especially when it comes to forests, because that leads me to my second point. When you get in deep into the forest, it's very dark, and it's almost like shooting at night. So, you can use a slow shutter app if you wanted to and play around with that deep in the forest, or what I also like to do is just kind of find some openings, like in this photo. If you look down the trail, the boy is standing in the light. But other than that, surrounding him, it's mostly dark. That's because there was one opening where some light could get in on this trail. So that leads me to the next point called find open areas. And so if you're in the woods and you want to take pictures with like a subject, usually it's a good thing to find something that you can contrast the subject against, especially if it's deep in the woods where it's very dark. And so here's a very wooded park that we were at, but it did have a little bit of a hill. And so I managed just to pop upon the scene. This is a stranger in this photo. I happened just to see him hanging out in a hammock and captured this. But you can see how you can play with these dense trees, but just find a little teeny bit of an opening and have a subject right there to really give a good focal point. And here's another photo that shows, there's an opening. If you look at the sky as sort of a V, you can see how the bottom of the V is pointing right at the subject, the car. And then you look at the road as a V, and that's pointing at this car too. So I like how it has all these different leading lines intersecting right where the subject is. And the woods on both sides are very dense. Again, it was sunset, so those woods are actually lit up by the sunset, but it was just dark enough where the car already had its lights on too. So you can really work with an open space in the middle of a dense forest, and you still manage to capture a dense forest. However, you also happen to have a subject that is separated and becomes sort of a focal point. So that's what I like about that photo too. And another fun thing to do is to use the woods as a backdrop. Here are my friends, Eric and Emily, in the famous woods in Ohio that lots of people go to take photos of. And obviously I gave Emily this red dress and Eric the red umbrella. It really makes them stand out. And you can't really tell it, but they're actually walking through kind of an opening, like the trees were all in a row, and so here was a big open row that they could walk down, and that's what gave all the trees sort of that symmetry, so that it looks like, they have something. You can kind of see the line of trees straight down the middle. And the other reason I put this picture in also is to talk about how snow really gives a nice reflective quality, and so it really brightened up the woods and adds a lot of white, makes everything brighter. So even in the darker areas of the woods, when there's snow, you have that reflective quality that does give you some more light, which is nice. This photo is an edit. Everything in this photo was taken as is, except for what is on the screen of the TV. So I actually did have my son sit there and look at a blank TV. And in this instance, the woods just works as a backdrop. He's not really interacting with the woods, but it just makes for like something that's interesting in the background. So that's one way that you can work with woods. And the way you do that a lot of times is by shooting on the peripheral. Here's another photo of my son with the umbrella. And it looks like he's in the dense forest with this umbrella. However, right behind him where I'm standing is an opening to a logger road. So he's standing in sort of a field right where the forest begins. And so that is giving me all the light that is coming through the opening where there's a road and there aren't any trees. It's all coming in and shining on him. So even though he looks like he's in a dense forest, he's actually standing kind of on the periphery, the outskirts of this forest, which brings in a lot of light. So that's what I like to do a lot of times when I shoot with woods, is just shoot right on the periphery of it, right on the edge, so that you get the wooded backdrop, but you still get plenty of light and you're not in that dense, dark forest area that makes everything so dark. And finally, don't forget about perspective when you're shooting. Look up, look down. There's many beautiful ways to shoot in the woods. So don't forget to look around. And always try to go there. I kind of hinted with this with the snow, but try to visit the woods on different seasons, because every season will give you a whole new backdrop. If you saw where I took this picture of my husband walking down the street in the summer, you would be like, what? Because people comment on this picture about how beautiful it is where this is taken, and it's beautiful because the leaves have covered the road, and the beautiful leaves show up. You're not really seeing all the kind of old cabins around. There's multiple cabins on the left-hand side in this photo, but they're kind of covered up. So it does look like he's maybe in the woods or something, but he's just walking down the road. It still is pretty no matter what time of year, but definitely the leaves added something. So don't forget to use the seasons sort of as your muse and play with them. So that wraps up my talk about how to shoot iPhone photos in the mountains and forests. As you can see, a lot of it has to do with the lighting, backlit mountains versus the light coming onto the mountains, where you stand in the forest, if you can get a little opening where you can get some light on you, and also using a subject in both of them, kind of in the foreground. Always it's a fun thing to use and do, and using the mountains or the woods as a backdrop. So I hope that was helpful, and thank you for your time.
I hope you enjoyed this video with Jill Emmer as much as I did, and by now you should have a lot of new techniques and tips for how you can take beautiful and unique iPhone photos of mountains and forests. we've actually recorded an entire video course on nature photography with Jill Emmer. And this video course is available as a part of our iPhone Photo Masters program. And also as a part of iPhone Photo Masters, there's a total of 18 in-depth video courses like this, each taught by a different world-class iPhone photographer. So in the next video in this free video series, you're going to learn from another world-class iPhone photographer. Her name is Christina Coley, and she takes the most beautiful iPhone photos of flowers I've ever seen in my life. So in the next video, you're going to find out everything there is to know about taking exceptional iPhone photos of flowers. But now, before you go, please leave a quick comment below and tell me and Jill which of the techniques you learned about today you're going to try out in your own iPhone photography. So just leave a quick comment below and let everyone know which of the techniques you learned about today you're going to use in your iPhone photography. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.